Hello, I'm Luke Popovich, Vice President of Communications for the National Mining Association. Having worked for the coal and mining industry for a dozen years, I know a few things about government regulations. As you may have heard, President Obama is proposing a big one. He has called for a 30% reduction in U.S. carbon emissions by 2030. While that may sound like an admirable goal, there's one problem with the President's plan for reaching that target. You are going to cover the cost of getting there. That's because the administration's plan for reducing carbon emissions, the so-called Clean Power Plan created by the Environmental Protection Agency, relies on replacing your state's low-cost power supplies with more expensive and less reliable ones. Here's how the plan works. EPA has come up with what it calls an electricity emissions budget for each state. These budgets are based on complex assumptions about future electricity demand, changes in electricity sources, and reductions in energy use. EPA calls on states to submit their own power plans based on these assumptions. But here's the problem. While EPA calls these assumptions building blocks, anyone else would call them wild guesses. And they are wild guesses, bad ones. According to the organization that monitors the dependability of power systems, EPA in fact underestimates the number of power plants that will be closed under the plan and overestimates the amount of new power sources and energy efficiency that will be available to fill the gap. Others agree. Regional power authorities, public utility commissioners, and utility executives all warn that the plan will endanger the reliability of our electric grid. Cascading outages could become the new normal. And when affordable sources of electricity are reduced, the cost of electricity obviously goes up. Some energy economists say the Clean Power Plan will actually become the costly power plan, causing wholesale electricity costs to spike and forcing higher utility bills onto households and businesses. Economists aren't the only critics. Some legal scholars believe EPA's building block approach is founded on weak constitutional ground and may, in fact, unlawfully impose on authority that rightfully belongs to the states. To add insult to injury, there is virtually no environmental benefit from this costly rule. EPA admits global warming reductions would be measured in fractions of 1 degree Fahrenheit. In short, it's all pain and no gain. For all of these reasons, state leaders across the country are coming to the same conclusion, that we should not sacrifice our power system to an unworkable plan built on a faulty interpretation of the law. The good news is that every state's governor does have a choice under the Clean Air Act. A governor can choose not to submit a state power plan to EPA. Recently, the Supreme Court gave governors another reason to reject EPA's plan. The High Court struck down the agency's earlier 2012 rule on power plants because EPA failed to consider the cost of the rule before imposing it. It is not rational, said the court, to ignore the cost of a rule, especially when those costs far exceed the benefits. The Clean Power Plan bears the same flaw. It ignores what we'll all pay for benefits that are paltry and barely measurable. Governors should refuse to surrender control of their state's energy policy to regulators who ignore the cost to their citizens. It's time for the nation's governors to push back. And this time, the most effective course of action is to take no action at all. Let your governor know the EPA's new emissions rule goes too far. Go to countoncoal.org and click on Take Action. Urge your governor to reject EPA's new rules. Thank you.